Team, welcome to another episode of Ask Top, sponsored by MentorMilitary.com. I'm your co-host today, Command Sergeant Major retired Mark Gerecht, and my co-host with me is Richard Green, aka Oz. Today we're going to talk about punishment versus corrective training. Go ahead, Green.
What's going on, Mark? How you doing?
Doing all right, brother.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into it. So I think this is a topic that's very near and dear to a lot of people, and let's just go ahead and dive into it. So the definition of punishment, like when we think of punishment, what comes to mind for you?
Article 15, court martial, even administrative letters of reprimand, administrative reduction in grade, stuff like that.
And I like to point out, like, everything that you said had a theme. Everything that you said would be coming from a commanding officer. It would not be coming from a non-commissioned officer.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably where we should start our conversation. So
now, one thing I do want to say is NCOs can give letters of admonishment. But
what's that?
A letter of admonishment. Hey, you've been a bad boy or girl. Same thing as a counseling, just a little supposedly stronger.
Okay.
But you know, that hardly ever happens. What happens typically when we think of punishment is everything that the officer has the authority to do.
So could you give us an example?
Okay.
Could you give us an example of what would be a good time to probably use that tool, the letter of admonishment?
You know, that's something I think where you've done your counseling and you don't want to proceed to a punishment phase. And you say, hey, look, I'm going to give you a letter of admonishment. The next time we're going to see the first sergeant commander. Something like that. You know, a small step up.
Okay. Well, hey, take it and put it in your tool bag. I'm definitely going to put it in mine. Definitely going to put it in mine. So when we look at punishment, like we said, we talked about the things that would come from a commander, or the letter of admonishment. I think you call it, right? Admonishment. What's the purpose behind implementing punishment? Like, why do we need punishment in organizations?
Well, I mean, when you think about that, it's to maintain good order and discipline.
So we hear that good order and discipline thrown around a lot. Like, I know that's something that we say a lot, but what exactly is good order and discipline?
Well, I think that depends. Well, I say it depends. Everybody's got their own definition, right? You know, discipline to me is doing the right thing when no one else is looking. You know what's right. So go ahead and do it. Don't overlook it. Don't blow it off. And surely don't do it halfway. Your thoughts?
No, I like to think of it as how we control the culture of an organization, right? I've heard people say a lot that the culture of an organization is determined by the worst behavior that the leader will allow in that organization. So when I think of good order and discipline, that's what comes to mind for me is what's the worst behavior you're allowing in your organization when we talk about good order and discipline. If you allow things to just go by and nothing is done about it, then that good order and discipline ain't gonna be too good.
Well, there's an old saying that when you allow something to go uncorrected, you just set a new standard. So the issue, I believe, is all of us are different. All of us have, whether we like it or not, we all have our pet peeves. And I know mine was, if you can't be on time, be early. If you can plan to be 2 minutes late, you could have planned to be 2 minutes early. Of course, nobody plans to be late, but I would really get frustrated when people would be late to a meeting, late to formation, whatever. But when you take it all into consideration, Yeah, we all strive for the same standard. That's why we have regulations and stuff to tell us what the minimum standard is. Um, Sometimes people want to go above and beyond the standard and hold people accountable to something that's above the standard. My question is that right?
Mm, I don't know. I think that's a good question. I've I've always looked at the standard as the bare minimum.
Okay,
Like the
so
standard.
I had a warrant officer.
Hmm.
His score on the PT test was 180 consistently.
Hmm.
Consistently. And one day he made 181 and he got up and he went, damn, I overachieved. And Chief, I was like, Chief, he goes, I can make 270, man, but 180 is good enough for me. And he said, that's the Army standard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that coined another phrase from me. Low standards are better than no standards. But
Well, no.
you
Well,
know,
when I said it's the bare minimum, um, I said that because we got to get people to meet the minimum to do the things that we do. And if we can't get people to meet the medium, we'll never be able to worry about exceeding the medium. Like the medium gets us in the fight.
mean the minimum.
Yes, the minimum gets us in the fight. Like the minimum gets us in the fight. It gets us to where we're trying to go to. It's not necessarily going to make us win, but
Well,
it'll make us effective.
inspiration and motivation get us above
Hmm.
and beyond.
Hmm.
So when you think about it, if I motivate you, you're going to do more than the minimum. And when I
Hmm.
say motivate, I don't mean um, berate and beat it into you. I mean inspire, motivate, influence.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's nice to say that we all have the same standard. We should all have the same minimum standard, but as you well know, that diversity of leaders in a unit, there are shades of gray when it comes to standards, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There
So,
most definitely are. Well,
um, go ahead.
let's talk about the implementation of punishment, because I think this is where a lot of folks get in trouble. Um, in your experience, who who implements punishment and why?
Commanders only.
Commanders
They
only.
have disciplinary authority.
Hmm.
Non-commissioned officers do not have disciplinary authority under regulation. We have the ability to perform corrective action and
Hmm.
correct mistakes. We have the ability to recommend punishment, but we cannot punish by regulatory guidance.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I shouldn't say regulatory guidance because regulations generally, typically, usually are punitive in nature, meaning they're punishable.
Hmm. Well, there's that. Don't get no.
Or
Hey,
think
there's
about it
no.
this way: AR 670-1 and DA PAM 670-1. What's the difference?
Hmm. Well,
AR
the.
670-1 is punitive in nature. You can be punished for violating it.
Hmm.
DA PAM 670-1 tells you how to wear it.
Uh-huh. Yep. So the AR is the what, and the DAPM is the how.
Yep. Good way
Okay.
of looking at it.
All right. Um. So when we talk about let's talk about some real world examples of, you know, well, I think we'll save that till we get over to corrective actions, because if it's a punishment, it's been laid out. It's in black and
Right.
white. It's been blessed off by legal. There, you're not going to get an illegal punishment because it's been blessed off. It's done went through the legal team and all that good stuff.
Well, at
And
least we hope so.
okay, hope so.
I have seen a reduction of an E5 to an E3 by
Mm,
a battalion commander. And I
mm,
was like, huh? He can only take one grade. How do we get
mm,
the E? And it got by legal.
mm,
But as soon as the soldier said, wait a minute, whoops, now he's an E4.
mm. Funny how that
So
works.
I've only seen that once in a career though, but
Okay.
I was just like, what? E5 to E3, how did that happen?
Mm. So that you saw that one time in 27 years.
That's it.
Mm.
And
Okay.
it usually, generally, typically, usually everybody's got their stuff together.
Hmm. Hmm.
When you go in for an Article 15, odds are you ain't walking out with nothing.
Yeah.
So
Something happened to get you there. Something definitely happened to get you there. Well, let's talk about corrective training. You've been around the block multiple times. You know, you've made all these videos, and we're gonna link a couple videos in here that Mark has done on corrective training. There's a part 1 and part 2. But we'll put a link in the video so that you can go back and watch those as well. But talk to us about corrective training. Like, what is corrective training? You know, when done well.
well, it's important to understand that people call corrective training by different names.
Mm,
So does the regulation. Extra training, extra military instruction, corrective training, on the spot correction. All of those can be used as corrective training.
hmm
Um, and I think it's important that we talk about what regulations and military manuals cover corrective training. AR 600-20 is a regulation. And then you have TC 21 or 7-21.13 Soldier's Guide, and then the NCO guide, and that escapes me. TC
hmm
721 something, I think. Now I'm
hmm
embarrassed. But those cover, and AR's 27-10 military justice. So when we think about that, um, with corrective training, there's some rules. And those rules are important to follow because failure to follow those rules are going to get non-commissioned officers in trouble.
mm,
And to another degree, officers as well, because if they allow non-commissioned officers to execute punishment or something that's perceived as punishment, that's in violation of the regulation. Now, also abuse,
mm.
because corrective training and punishment are not abuse. And there's AR 620 is pretty clear on what harassment, abuse, and those things are. So corrective training requires that doctrine tells us it must not be punishment or appear to be punishment. It has to be directly related to the offense or the observed deficiency, must specifically address the issue you are trying to correct, be discontinued once that substandard performance is corrected. It can't be used in place of UCMJ. And it's important for leaders to remember you are responsible for the health, welfare, and safety of your soldiers. Think about that.
Mhm.
Soldier gets hurt during corrective training, who's responsible?
Person giving it.
And what happens when the soldier gets a profile or something? Tells the first sergeant or commander, hey, I got hurt because I was getting smoked. Because that's another issue. Smoke
Mhm,
sessions are illegal.
mhm,
They're not corrective training. I mean, when you exhaust somebody with physical fitness, that's not corrective training. Now, let's be clear. AR 67-1 allows a reasonable amount of exercise.
mhm,
Um, so, soldier a couple minutes late formation, drop, give me 5. It's meant to be instantaneous to get your attention. That's it.
mhm.
It's not, hey, I'm going to smoke you for 30 minutes because you were 4 minutes late for formation. Um, when we talk about corrective training, um, I'll use some examples for me, inappropriate examples. I had to cut grass on the parade field with a road guard vest for safety and a flashlight, and I was doing it at midnight. If that's not an oxymoron, I don't know what is. I was wearing a safety vest, cutting grass at night with a flashlight.
So what made it inappropriate? Like, other than the obvious, what made it inappropriate?
To me, safety was the big thing.
Okay.
I mean, because you got oh, by the way, I was unsupervised. And what's the thing about corrective training? Shouldn't I be supervised?
Got to be supervised.
But at midnight, I'm out there cutting grass. Why at midnight? I don't know, because I was told to. Imagine me pulling the lawnmower backwards and slipping and that lawnmower going over my foot. Another one is we had to clean the latrine with toothbrushes. Is that reasonable? Is that rational? I thought there was another one. Oh, soldier standing at the entrance to the main gate wearing a sandwich board that says, "I got a DUI, don't be me."
So once again, let's have this conversation, because I know there's going to be some naysayers out there like, hey, what's wrong with that? Why can't we put them out there with a sandwich board saying that I got a DUI? They're telling everybody they got a DUI, and we're discouraging that behavior. Like, what makes that inappropriate?
It cannot be belittling in nature or humiliating in nature. So the idea of corrective training and punishment is to correct and educate, right? Does that mean I belittle you? What happens when I belittle somebody? Do I get the point across, or do I cause animosity?
So we're eating away and eroding at that trust that we're supposed to have in our organizations when we do that.
Because most people feel like, if most people feel like you're treating me fairly and justly, they don't have to like it, but they get it. When you're overbearing with something and brutal with something, what is the definition of support you're going to get after that? Minimum. I'm only going to do what I have to do.
And that reminds me of the 3 leadership questions that I often hear John C. Maxwell talk about. He said that a subordinate that's following you is going to ask 3 things of you. The first thing they're going to ask is, do you care about me? I got you out here with a sandwich board on, embarrassing you. So the answer is probably no. The second question is, can you help me? I got you out here with a sandwich board on. So the answer is probably no. And the third question is, will you help me? Once again, I'm out here with a sandwich board on, and the answer is probably no. Like, if that individual got a DUI, maybe we need to put them into some type of ASAP training or something like that, so we can get after the why. Why did they get a DUI? Why are they drinking excessively? Why are they driving and consuming alcohol, making these bad decisions? So in that scenario, to me, the 3 main questions that a subordinate is going to ask of their leader, they were all answered no. If you get a no on one of those questions, people will not follow you.
And, I'll give you one more example of something that I saw being done. Cutting grass with a pair of scissors and a ruler. Come on now. Really? Now, what's wrong with the examples I gave? Besides being inappropriate, what does it teach other leaders?
Other inappropriate behaviors to carry on into the future.
Because if I'm a young sergeant and my staff sergeant's doing this, obviously my staff sergeant knows what the rules are, or he wouldn't be doing it. So when I give corrective training, what happens?
You're doing it wrong.
What about the story you got?
Oh yeah,
the monkeys.
Oh yeah. So there's this 5-monkey story. Basically, what these scientists do is they take a cage and they put 5 monkeys into this cage. And when they put these 5 monkeys into this cage, they suspend bananas from the top of the cage and they put a staircase. So, of course, the monkeys like bananas. So what do the monkeys do? First monkey runs upstairs. As he gets halfway upstairs and he's about to touch the bananas, they spray all the monkeys with cold water. Now the monkeys are upset. We just got sprayed with cold water. So they don't know why. Second monkey goes up. Same thing happens. Now they all know if you touch the steps, we're getting sprayed with water. So they remove 2 of the monkeys that were doing the beating, and they put 2 new monkeys in. So at this point, we have 3 monkeys who know that if you touch the steps, you get sprayed. One of the new monkeys goes up the steps, and as soon as he touches the steps, all the monkeys join in and they beat him up. So this goes on, and they continue to remove monkeys until the point of where we have no monkeys in the cage who have ever been sprayed with water. They just know if you touch the steps, you get beat up. And this continues to go on. These monkeys just continue to beat people up. They don't know why. Now, the thing behind this story is that this supports the whole, this is just the way that we do things here because it's the way that we've always done it. That's not a good way to go about doing things. We got to ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, remember, nothing is the way that it has to be. Why are we doing it this way? What's in black and white? Do we have doctrine to support this? Or even if it's a custom or courtesy, why do we do this? What is the significance behind this? Like, what is this? What is the reason that we're doing this thing? What is it helping us accomplish? And if we can't get no answers behind that, we probably shouldn't be doing it. What do you think, Mark?
You know, that's a good point. And when you look at a regulation, I used to share with people, the regulation contains some key words, and words are important. Will and must, could, should, may, might.
Mm-hmm.
Will and must are directive in nature and do not allow latitude. You will execute.
Mm-hmm.
Will, could, should, may, might allow latitude. And most regulations give commanders a broad latitude. And you often hear of exception to policy. Every regulation in front of the regulation has an exception clause. And there is someone that is allowed to make an exception to that regulation. Generally, typically, usually, that's the Deputy Chief of Staff G1.
Mm-hmm.
But the regulation also allows for waivers and exceptions for commanders in the field. For example, AR 635-200 deals with separations. It says that you will retrain a soldier before separating them, but it also gives the commander the latitude to provide an exception and say, no, I don't think that'll work. Let's go ahead and separate. Now, why do we have corrective training? What's the purpose of it?
Corrective training is the corrective behavior. We're trying to correct that deficiency and educate.
Educate, improve performance, stop the substandard performance. So when we were talking about unreasonable stuff, when you have corrective training, you have to provide the soldier the basic tools to get the job done. For example, let's say we're in the motor pool and you want them to clean out the sump pit for corrective training for some reason. You don't hand them an e-tool, you hand them a shovel.
Mm-hmm.
An e-tool is just a way of saying, I'm going to make this painful for you. Mm-hmm. It needs to be safe, and it needs to be done. It doesn't need to be in a ridiculous manner, like mowing grass at night with a flashlight, cutting grass with scissors, scrubbing floors with toothbrush. So there are times where corrective training can be difficult. Imagine that you see a soldier on post somewhere and they're doing something wrong, and you go to correct them and they give you some lip about it. How do you fix that? I think we both have a story. Mine turned out well. I was a sergeant major. I saw a drill sergeant smoking a young recruit, and I mean, it was brutal. So I called the drill sergeant over and I very quietly said, what you're doing is inappropriate. Stop it now. Yes, Sergeant Major. And meet me in your Sergeant Major's office. So I went over, saw the Sergeant Major, and I said, hey, here's what was going on. He'll be here in a minute. Soldier walks in and I said, Sergeant, were you doing this, 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 and this? Yes, Sergeant Major. What happened? You stopped me, corrected me, told me to come here. And Sergeant Major looked at me, looked at the soldier, and started saying, what are you doing? Why are you violating policy? And I said, Sergeant Major, excuse me, this is your world. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And I left. That Sergeant Major started taking corrective action, whatever he deemed appropriate. Now, you got one that's a little bit different, right?
Yeah. When I was a staff sergeant, I was leaving work and I stopped by a gas station to get some drink before I got home. And there was a young soldier in there, had no top on. He just had his tan t-shirt, boots, and his trousers. So I go inside the store. You know, I didn't want to make a scene or anything. So I pay for my drink and I go to walk out and I pass him. I'm like, hey, soldier, when you get done with your purchase, could I speak to you outside? He's like, sure, Sergeant. So he goes, pays for whatever he has, he comes outside. And I'm like, hey, man, you can't be outside with no top on, you know. He's like, well, in my unit, this is how we do it. This is what my commander said we can do, this, that, and the third. I'm like, I understand all of that. I got it. But you're not in the proper uniform in accordance with AR 670-1. I'm like, you need to put your top on and you need to put your headgear back on. So he was like, well, this is how we do it in my unit. I'm not doing it. I'm like, okay, well, what's your name? I don't have to give you my name. All right, let me see your ID because I need to go have a conversation with someone in your unit. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. He gets in his car and he leaves. And the reason that I tell that story is because a lot of young leaders will grow up and they don't see that side. They'll just see Sergeant Major Gerecht go over and make an on-the-spot correction and it's done. Or they'll see Captain so-and-so say this and it'll just happen. They don't see all the times when it don't go right. And that's the conversation that we need to have. Like, what do you do in that situation? So this is what I did. The way I see it, I had a couple of options there. Option number one, I could have got unprofessional and forced him to do what I told him to do, which would have caused an altercation. And now I got to deal with that on the back end. Now, that option feeds into ego, right? It feeds into ego. And your ego will get you in trouble every time. Because in that, the theme of that scenario right there was this person didn't do what I told them to do. They didn't obey me. All right. It's not about people following what you tell them to do. It's about like what's right and wrong. The other option I had was walk away, get rid of the ego, get in my vehicle, and maybe I'll see him on post. And if I do see him on post, I'll follow into his unit and let his chain of command know what happened. Never saw this kid again, but I feel like that was a crisis averted, regardless of if I got to his unit or not. If he continued to do the things and behave the way in a manner that he was, eventually something was going to happen. And I didn't have to make it happen on that day.
Oh, that's a good point. So let's peel that onion back. So what you're saying is he appeared to be a substandard performer.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said is a substandard performer will continue to perform substandardly.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think about that when it comes to a soldier in a unit. Some people are like, well, I couldn't get him for that, so I'm going to get him for this. That's going after a soldier. Now, you don't need to go after a substandard performer. Let's say you recommend an Article 15, that Article 15 is denied, and they say, no, it's not good enough. So you get angry and you start looking for things. Odds are the leader is the one that's going to get in trouble because it's going to appear to come out that it's vindictive in nature. Whereas if the soldier's a substandard performer, hey, okay, soldier got by, no worries, no issues. Sooner or later, they're going to do something, not that you're trying to get them. They're going to do something that rises to the level of corrective training or punishment. Let it be on the soldier. Like you said, don't let your ego get the best of you. But something that you brought up earlier in that discussion you had with that young soldier takes me back to the two types of authority we have. We have command authority, which originates from the president and is supplemented by regulation. And a leader can exercise this over subordinates by virtue of rank and assignment to a leadership position. And command authority is also exercised when the Army when a member of the Army is assigned or assumes a position requiring direction and control of other members of the Army. So we have that. But then there's this thing called general military authority. It originates in oath of office, enlistment, law, rank, structure, traditions, and regulation. It's broad-based, allows leaders to take appropriate corrective action whenever a member of the armed services commits an act involving breach of good order and discipline. AR 600-20 specifically gives this authority to commissioned, warrant, and non-commissioned officers. Why do I bring that up? You were you were in a position where, believe it or not, you could have put your hands on that guy, according to this. My question becomes, and when I say put your hands on him, that's a bad example. Let's say there's two soldiers that are fighting, and I walk up and say, break it up, and they don't break it up. And I put my hands on somebody and break them apart. The police come in. Next thing you know, there's 3 people being arrested, not 2. And the commander comes down and says, what are you doing? I was trying to break up a fight. Why were you in the fight? I was trying to break it up according with general military authority. No, you were in a fight. Oops. Now, the police report says I was in a fight. I say I was trying to break it up. Hey, you got to use caution and good judgment. Do you let those 2 soldiers go at it? Maybe. If you step in and try and break that up and somebody throws a punch and hits you and you punch back, I think you're in the fight. Whether you meant to be or not, your intentions, your good intentions don't necessarily matter when it comes down to the letter of the law, because now a commander has to decide who doesn't know anything about the story except what they're reading in the police report. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
to walk away was a mature decision. And you had other options. You could have waited. You could
I
have
felt
taken
like that was one. That
Go
was
ahead.
definitely one of those situations where you got to ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Absolutely.
Some people may have chosen something different. And I even agree with you on the whole fighting scenario. I've always made it a point to never do something where someone else has to decide my fate. Like the thing I was told growing up is that if you're explaining, you've already lost. If you're explaining, you've already lost. So don't put yourself into a situation where you have to explain.
Right. And just, there's another video I have, but basically it talks about authority. Just because you have the authority or the power over someone doesn't necessarily mean you need to use it. Because power and authority are a dangerous thing. You got to know when to use it and how to use it and when to back off. I think you made a mature decision to back away because nothing positive was going to come out of that. Yeah, you could have sat back, waited for him getting his card, taken out his tag, gone to the MPs and said, had a problem with this soldier. Can you have his chain of command? Call me. Because they're not going to give you the unit. Well, they shouldn't give you the unit of the soldier based on, because they're not going to pull that license tag just to help you out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I just want to caution people that, yeah, you have general military authority, you have command authority to some degree, but you need to be cautious in how you exercise that, because ultimately you're responsible for your decisions, and any corrective training you do, you're responsible for the health, welfare, and safety of that soldier. Let's look at some poor examples of, or proper examples. Let's look at proper examples of corrective training. So since we already looked at improper examples. So if I have a soldier in poor physical shape, what can I do?
Remedial PT.
Okay.
When I say remedial PT, what I mean is, and these are mistakes that we made in the past, right? We would have a soldier who's in poor physical fitness condition, and then we make them PT 3 times a day. They do PT in the morning with everybody. We make them do PT at lunch, and then we make them do PT again after work. And this is what happened when we did that. For a small percentage of that population, they got better at PT because they were doing more of it. But a larger percentage of that population ended up getting injured. And then once they got injured, guess what happened? Now they're on a profile. So we made them do all of this PT. They got injured. Now they're on a profile. And once they get on the profile, guess what's the next thing that's going to happen? Because let's go back to those 3 questions. Do you care about me? Can you help me? Will you help me? Do you care about me? I'm failing at PT. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a young person. I need some help. Then I overexert you. Will you help me? All right. Maybe you're trying to help me. Can you help me? Like, that's a question to your credibility. Now, we done put them in this remedial PT 3 times a day. They've gotten injured. Now they're on their way to be chaptered out the Army because they can't overcome the injury because we still have them doing all of this PT. So our inability to make sound decisions and do scaling led to people injuring themselves.
Okay, good point. Now, there's one critical piece that should be there. When I'm doing PT, who should be there with me?
Supervisor.
And a lot of times, when I watched corrective training when I was in, supervisors weren't there. And as a senior leader, I was like, hold up. Well, CQ's taking care. No. It's your responsibility if you're going to give corrective training to monitor that corrective training. Yeah, it takes time out of your schedule. Yes, it's more work, but I'm going to tell you something that my soldiers figured out real quick. I was crazy. If I gave you corrective training, I was going to be there with you the whole time.
Yep.
And when you do the remedial PT thing, you hit right on the head. One, if the leader is there, I care. And if the leader's there and involved, I'm going to make sure that the PT we give those people rotates body parts so that we don't overtrain. I'm going to make them do it 5 days, 7 days a week? Probably not. We're doing PT 3 days a week. What was their weakness in the physical fitness test or the ACFT? Should we focus on that or focus on the muscle groups that are required in that event that you failed? I mean, I used to do something with push-ups. When soldiers failed push-ups and sit-ups, I would say, okay, I want you to start doing push-ups until you can't do any more push-ups. And I want you to freeze. Okay, what hurts? Do the back of your arms hurt? Does this little piece up here hurt? Does your lower back hurt? Because that tells me what part of the body is failing first. That's the area I need to work on. When I'm doing sit-ups, is it my quads that are hurting? Is it my stomach that's hurting? That's what's failing.
Yeah.
So I focus on that. So you're right. Remedial PT correctly done with a supervisor present. Unclean personal or work area. What do we do?
Well, we've seen this go both ways. Like you have a young service member, domestic kid, and their room is destroyed. Then you see folks going there like, oh, you're gonna move your whole barracks room outside onto the lawn, and we're gonna clean it, and then you're gonna move it back in. That at the end of the day, like you gotta make connections with people. I've had service members. We come from all different walks of lives. I had a service member who had never been taught how to wash clothes. He had never been taught how to wash clothes, and he was a heavy sweater, so he would go to sleep at night and he would literally sweat through his mattress. He would sweat through his mattress, like regardless of what the temperature, he would sweat through his mattress. So that mattress being sweated through like that constantly, and him not having very good hygiene upbringing, he didn't know how to take care of it. So we went in, we had a conversation, we did our little NCO investigation to like see what was going on, because we want to do problem understanding. I'm not here to drop the axe on you or embarrass you or anything like that. You're a part of me. You're one of my people. I want to see you be great. So let's look into what's going on here. What's the why behind it? And once we sat down and we had a conversation, I'm like, show me how you wash your clothes. We go over to the laundry machine. He's pouring fabric softener in for laundry detergent. He didn't know. He didn't know. Then, we get all this stuff figured out. We do the hygiene class with him. We get the mattress out, get it dried out and stuff like that. And we got him on a regiment to where these things didn't become a problem anymore because they were manageable. He just didn't know how to manage them. So what good would it have done? How would that soldier have felt if I said, hey, because of this right here, I'm going to make you move all your stuff out the barracks, and he lived on the 3rd floor, onto the lawn. We're going to go in. I'm going to stand over you and make you clean this room and do all this other crazy stuff. And then you're going to move it back in when he just didn't know. I would have lost a soldier. He would have not wanted to be in the Army.
It's funny you say that because I did that once.
Mm-hmm.
Moved everything out. Why did I do that? That's the way my sergeants did us. And when I say us, I mean collectively.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a platoon sergeant stopped me when I was in E5 and said, Gerecht, what are you doing? You know, is that necessary? And so he talked to me. I was like, holy crap. I did corrective training the way it was done for me. So I'm like the little monkey in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because that's how it's always done for us. So good point. Understand when somebody makes a mistake, is corrective training necessary or is education necessary so they understand the standard and how to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that could be something as simple as a discussion. I mean, it is on the spot correction. It is corrective training. But to what level do you need to go?
I think we need to hit on 3 things before we wrap it up.
All right.
The first thing is like, what constitutes punishment and what constitutes corrective training?
Where are you going?
Okay, when I say what constitutes punishment, like if these things in this wheelhouse were to happen, you are going to receive a punishment. If these things over here happen, you will get corrective training.
Well, that's not a hard and fast rule because, and you know, that's a good point because a lot of young leaders want to jump to an Article 15. That's what they know.
Yeah.
But my question as a platoon sergeant, first sergeant, sergeant major was, why are we jumping to an Article 15? Is this something that we can handle at the lowest possible level and achieve the results we want to achieve? Now, there are certain things that rise to the level of an Article 15. Drugs, drinking and driving, domestic violence, things like that, they're out of the corrective training world. So if it's reasonable and it can be taken care of with corrective training, to me, that's where you should start. Because when you go in to see the commander, you can say, hey, I gave a counseling statement. I provided corrective training. It didn't work. And we got the same problem. I'm looking for to get their attention. You have the ability to recommend punishment, but one thing you have to remember, when you turn that over to the commander and first sergeant, you no longer have any control. You can recommend, but if you do not want that soldier to be reduced in grade, recommending an Article 15 takes that decision out of your hands. You can recommend, hey, I don't want them reduced, just want them suspended. But what if the commander reduces them? You're still responsible for maintaining good order and discipline. But to me, it's best to handle it at the lowest possible level until it's obvious that's not going to work. Talk to your senior leaders in your unit. Get some ideas. Talk to them about different methods of corrective training. One method I used to use was writing essays. 500 word, 1,000 word essays. Why did you do it? Why was it inappropriate? How are you going to stop it from happening again in the future? Now, I have seen people turn that around into something that I think is totally unreasonable. 5,000, 10,000 word essays. No, that's not, the purpose isn't to make you miserable. The purpose is to correct and educate. The last thing I think we might want to cover is revocation of privileges as a method of getting somebody's attention.
Let me get you to answer one more thing before we switch to that. On the spot corrections, right? Because we just talked about corrective training versus punishment, right? So on the spot corrections, there's 2 dynamics there. Like there's a difference between an on the spot correction and corrective training. And I think often young leaders may get them confused. For example, some may have said that I should have done corrective training for the gas station situation when I had no ability to do corrective training. I was able to, in that capacity, execute an on-the-spot correction, and it was up to the soldier to comply. So, how would you explain to uh, a young leader the difference in between a on-the-spot correction and corrective training?
I think on the spot corrections are very simple, like what you said, correct a uniform, prevent an unsafe act, something like that. But you also make me think about something else when this soldier failed to correct and they were in another unit.
Hmm.
I've also seen it where in the same unit, a non-commissioned officer makes an on-the-spot correction, and soldier basically says, I don't work for you."
Hmm.
And that NCO then goes to the other soldier's NCO and says, "Hey, this happened. I'd like to write a counseling statement." And they say, "No." Well, wait a minute. What you did was just undermine the authority. Unless, of course, the NCO that was trying to make the on the spot correction was wrong or being inappropriate. So,
Hmm.
what do you do then? You got to take it up the chain, right? Or you got to
Hmm.
drop it.
Yeah.
Um, so, on the spot corrections, we are assuming that the soldier is going to do what's right because it complies with good order and discipline.
Hmm.
And the hard part is figuring out what to do when they don't comply and they don't work for you, or they're in another unit, or the NCOs that they work with don't want to support you.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you definitely, in my opinion, I feel that anytime you approach any of these situations with your ego, is going to be a problem. Like there's a conversation to be had about, and this is with junior non-commissioned officers when they go from specialist, corporal to sergeant. And the conversation is like, what do you do when that young soldier tells you no? Now, if you let ego take over, you're going to be in trouble because there's only two paths that's going to go down. You get into a verbal or physical altercation, and you got to deal with the unintended consequences for that. Or there's another option: take ego out the way, put it on paper, and let the system work through the process. Let the process work. But a lot of times when that conversation doesn't happen, we get the first two options instead of the third.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I wanted to share with you, you and I briefly talked about this revocation of privileges.
Yes.
Tell me what you think about that.
Based off of what you told me, I knew what it was. I just had never heard it referred to in those terms. So you basically gave me a framework to actually talk about it because it was something uh, that I've done in the past. But I think it's an awesome approach to take, and I believe that leaders need to be educated to act upon it correctly. Because if they try to utilize authority that they don't have, that's going to cause problems.
Right. And the only person that can revoke privileges is the commander having authority over that privilege.
Hmm.
So, what are we talking about? Pretty much anything you do in the military can be related to a privilege.
Hmm.
Pass, civilian clothing, personal property, driving privileges, PX commissary, alcohol, MWR, off post living, visitation, tobacco, weapons, off duty employment, unit sports, all those things. And there's
Hmm.
probably a ton of other ones. Um, let's say you want to revoke on post driving privileges. The
Hmm.
company commander doesn't have that authority. The garrison commander has that authority.
Hmm.
But can you imagine the company commander sending over a letter or an email to the garrison commander saying, "This happened with this soldier, and I believe the on post driving privileges need to be revoked"? If it's a reasonable request, what do you think that garrison commander is going to do?
Wilco.
Yep.
He's gonna comply.
Now, he's probably, a good garrison commander would bring the soldier over with their chain of command and say, "What's going on?" And make a
Hmm.
decision from there versus just making a decision off of an email. But when we look at this, it's a good way to correct substandard performers. And, you know, if we're talking about taking away alcohol and tobacco privileges, there needs to be a nexus to that. I
Hmm.
was throwing a cigarette butt on the ground, or I came into the barracks and there were beer bottles laying on the floor, something like that. But there's so many ways to get a soldier's attention. When, Colin Powell said, soldiers don't care how much they know till they know how much you care.
Yep.
When they know you care, they want to help. They want to do right. They don't want to disappoint. They have respect for you. Don't abuse it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, John C. Maxwell, he said something similar. He has this scenario that he makes up where he talks about getting buy-in. And he says that there's two things that people will try to do. Like usually we try to sell an idea to someone before we try to sell ourselves to them. So let's say we get someone to buy into an ideal, but they haven't bought into us. What usually it will happen is that person won't follow you. If you could force them to, but they're not going to follow you. They're going to do whatever they want to because they've bought into the ideal, but they haven't bought into you. Let's say they buy into you, but they don't buy into the ideal. They'll follow you. They'll follow you. They're going to try to constantly get you to change your mind, but they'll follow you, right? And we can get some stuff done because in the meantime, they're following. They're going to get some things done. Now, if we get someone to buy into us first, and then we get them to buy into the idea, that is what we want. Like that is the golden standard. That is how we get people to do the things that we need to, is getting them to buy into us first. And then because they've bought into us, now they're going to buy into this ideal that we have, and they'll give the support that we need to give them. And I think that goes into the whole commitment versus compliance conversation and the whole influence piece.
Right. One thing I want to bring up about physical exercise, AR 600-20 used to be very specific. You could do 5 repetitions of designated exercises. That was it. Now it says that you can do command approved exercises. So I don't know too many commanders out there that have put out guidance on what's approved for corrective training. So as a non-commissioned officer, be careful how you use exercise. Make sure it's something quick and to the point just to gain some quick attention. But nothing abusive, no smoke sessions. Smoke sessions are going to get you in trouble, potentially get you relieved or reduced. You hurt that soldier, that's on you. Treat people like you want to be treated.
Yep. And I think me and you talked about the connection piece with the corrective training when we were talking about education. A big part of corrective training is the connection that you have with the person that you're doing corrective training with. Now, if you haven't built a bond or built a connection with that individual, they may do everything that you're telling them to do, and they're not really going to think about doing it. Because I remember when I was younger, like I was a PT stud. It didn't really matter what you threw at me. Like I was going to do it. Like they say, you either going to get strong or you're going to get smart. I was real strong. I got real strong, right? So and the perfect example is this. Like I remember growing up, they told us, don't walk in the grass. All the sergeant majors, don't walk in the grass, don't walk in the grass, don't walk in the grass. First sergeants, don't walk in the grass. Guess what we did? We walked in the grass. We like, it's grass. Why we can't walk in the grass, right? And we got jacked up for it. We got smoked, all of this good stuff. 20 years later, one of my mentors, right? Sergeant Major Dangerfield. He said, Green. No, not Sergeant Major Dangerfield, Sergeant Major Griffin, Garrett Griffin. He said, Green, you know why we used to tell y'all not to walk in the grass? I'm like, I have no clue. I thought that was just what sergeant majors did. They taught y'all to do that at the academy, and that's what y'all brought back to the unit, and we was just doing it. He's like, likely story, but no. Look, the reason we were telling y'all not to walk in the grass was this. If you were willing to take a shortcut through the grass and not walk on the sidewalk, then guess what else? What else in your life are you willing to take a shortcut on? It wasn't just about you walking in the grass. It's about life decisions. We're saying that if you're willing to compromise here, where else are you compromising at? And I'm sitting here like, Sergeant Major, why y'all didn't just tell us that? If that why had just been explained, we would have gleaned more from it, and we would have, been able to take that with us throughout life instead of just telling people to do things. So the why behind it is very important. Now, look, because me and Sergeant Major Griffin has a connection, and he told me that, I took it in. Same thing with corrective training. Like, you don't have to beat somebody up and yell at them and do all this other crazy stuff. If you have a connection with somebody, you can just let them know, like, you let me down, and that'll destroy the whole world. But if you haven't built the connection.
And you said something that makes the American soldier different than soldiers around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me why.
Mm-hmm.
When I understand why, I got it and I will move out. And in all the other armies I've been around, there was no why. There was no discussion.
Mm-mm.
It was shut up in color.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, stay in the lines too. No thought. Don't color outside the lines. I don't need you thinking.
Yep.
And I mean, back in World War II, do you know there was an IQ limit for the Marine Corps?
Really?
Because they didn't want people asking why.
Wow.
They just wanted doers.
Yeah.
So just a case in point. About ready to wrap this up. What you got? Anything else?
No, I think we covered everything. This is a conversation that's near and dear to me, because far too often, when we don't arm people with education, they go out and they make a decision that they're going to have to pay for with a lot of hard work that they've done. And we don't want that to happen. So we would rather educate folks and have these conversations and get leaders to start having conversations like this, so that when we get to the prefaces of whatever it is that we're doing, we're not just stuck there with no options and haven't thought of it before. Like, we would rather to have had the conversation, so at least you got a couple options, and now you can choose. You don't have to be reactive, you can be proactive.
It's all about education. I mean, you can be stubborn, you can do what you want, but I believe, nobody gets up out of bed in the morning and says, gee, I just want to go screw up. They get out of bed in the morning hoping that they're going to do the right thing, planning on doing the right thing. Young people make mistakes. Senior people make mistakes. Think about it this way. You're a sergeant first class. You're put in a first sergeant position. First time you're a first sergeant and you make a mistake. Why? Because you didn't know.
Yep.
Okay. Is it a mistake you can recover from? Is the key question.
Mm-hmm.
But be empathetic with people. Try to explain things to them. And then when you have to do the corrective training, do it with them.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know that you're crazy and you're going to take your time and spend it with them. You do that a few times and the word gets around, hey, look, just do it because he's crazy. So I really appreciate you working this event with me. Looking forward to do many more with you. Do you have any closing words?
No, just the whole attitude slogan that I like to throw out there. They say that attitudes are the one thing that we can control. This is what I've been told. Your attitude is the one thing that you can absolutely control. And attitudes are contagious like colds. Now, the leadership question is this, is if an attitude is contagious like a cold, is your attitude worth catching?
Outstanding. So we appreciate you watching. If you get a chance, reach over to mentormilitary.com. And until next time, stay healthy and stay safe.